Hollywood has seen plenty of rivalries, but few stories get talked about like this one, involving John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. One defined an era of classic Western heroes. The other changed what those heroes looked like forever. Over time, rumors of tension, criticism, and quiet disagreement started to build, but how much of it is actually true? Join us as we break down the truth behind rivalry and what really fueled the divide: a life of hardship. John Wayne, born Marion Morrison in 1907, did not start life with any clear path toward becoming one of Hollywood's biggest Western icons. His early years were shaped by constant moving as his family tried to build stability. These frequent relocations made it hard for him to settle into one place or one identity, and that sense of change stayed with him as he grew up. In school, Wayne showed more interest in sports than academics. At the University of Southern California, he played college football and was seen as a strong and promising athlete. However, his sports career came to an abrupt end after a serious injury. That injury closed the door on professional football and forced him to rethink his future. At that point, acting was not a planned goal. It became a direction he slowly fell into out of necessity. Wayne's entry into Hollywood was far from glamorous. He did not start as a star or even as an actor. He worked small studio jobs, including prop handling and other behind-the-scenes tasks. These early years were about survival in the industry rather than success. He observed how films were made, learned how sets operated, and slowly built connections with people in the business. He was often given very minor roles that did not bring attention or recognition. A major turning point came when director Raoul Walsh noticed him and encouraged him to take on more serious screen work. It was Walsh who played a role in shaping his screen identity and also suggested the name John Wayne, replacing his birth name, Marion Morrison. This change helped create a stronger, more commanding public image that suited the types of roles he would later become known for. Even with a new name and small opportunities, Wayne struggled for years. He was often typecast in low-budget westerns where the roles were repetitive and limited. These films did not give him much room to show depth or range as an actor. During this time, he faced frustration and uncertainty about whether he would ever break into major Hollywood productions. There were several moments when he seriously considered quitting acting altogether, feeling that progress was too slow and success was not coming. Everything changed with the film Stagecoach in 1939. This movie gave him a major leading role and finally brought him wide attention. His performance stood out, and audiences began to see him as a strong and reliable screen presence. Stagecoach did more than make him famous. It defined the image he would carry for the rest of his career. The American cowboy figure who represented toughness, confidence, and control. As his fame grew during the World War II era, Wayne became one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars. However, his rise also came with early criticism because he did not serve in the military during the war. While this did not stop his career, it did begin a public discussion around his image and personal choices, adding complexity to his growing fame. Still, by the end of this period, Wayne had fully established himself as a leading figure in American cinema, setting the foundation for everything that would follow in his career. He was now a star, but a very different actor was rising on the horizon, and his arrival would slowly shift Hollywood in a new direction. Clint the factory worker. Clint Eastwood grew up in a working-class environment in California, and his early life was shaped by constant movement and financial instability. His family shifted from place to place during the Great Depression era, trying to find steady work and better opportunities. Because of this, Eastwood grew up without a fixed sense of comfort or long-term stability, and he learned early how to adapt to changing situations. Before acting ever became part of his life, Eastwood worked many ordinary jobs. He spent time as a lifeguard and a gas station attendant, and even worked in a lumber mill. These jobs were not connected to entertainment in any way, but they gave him a strong work routine and a practical outlook on life. At that stage, acting was not a clear goal. It was more of a possibility that had not yet taken shape. During the Korean War era, Eastwood was drafted into the U.S. Army. He was stationed at Fort Ord in California. Although he went through military training, he never saw combat. A widely reported story from this period mentions a training accident involving a plane crash near the base, which led to changes in his service situation and ultimately kept him from being deployed overseas. After completing his time in service, he returned to civilian life with no clear career direction. Like many aspiring actors, Eastwood entered Hollywood slowly and without attention. He signed small contracts with Universal Pictures, but these early roles were minor and did not lead to immediate fame. He often appeared in small parts that did not highlight his personality or potential. For a long time, he was just another struggling actor trying to stay in the system and hoping for a break. His major turning point came when he was cast in the television series Rawhide. In the show, he played Rowdy Yates, a young cowboy helping manage cattle drives. The role was steady work, and it gave him regular exposure to audiences. Over time, viewers began to recognize his calm presence and quiet acting style. While Rawhide did not make him a global star, it gave him the visibility needed for bigger opportunities. During this early Hollywood period, Eastwood also made decisions that later became interesting parts of his story. There were several film roles he either turned down or did not pursue, which were later taken by other actors and became major successes. At the time, these choices did not seem significant, but they are often mentioned when discussing how his career developed more slowly before his international breakthrough. That breakthrough came unexpectedly when he was offered a role in an Italian Western film directed by Sergio Leone. These films, later known as spaghetti westerns, were very different from traditional American westerns. Eastwood was cast in A Fistful of Dollars, where he played a quiet, unnamed gunman. The film was produced on a small budget and was not expected to become a major success, but it quickly gained attention after release. The success of this film changed Eastwood's career completely. His image as a silent, controlled, and mysterious Western figure spread internationally, and he suddenly became a star far beyond Hollywood expectations. This was not a carefully planned rise, but an unexpected shift that placed him at the center of a new style of Western storytelling. At this point, Eastwood was no longer just a struggling actor or television face. He had become a new kind of Western star, and his growing fame would soon place him in contrast with Hollywood's older generation of icons. And what came next would slowly build a tension that no one in Hollywood fully expected: John Wayne's dominance. After the success of Stagecoach, John Wayne quickly moved into a position that very few actors ever reach. Hollywood began to shape him into something larger than just a film star. He was no longer only playing roles. He was becoming the face of a specific kind of American hero. His image was carefully built around strength, calm leadership, and a clear sense of right and wrong, which made him stand out in the Western genre. A major part of this rise came from his long collaboration with director John Ford. Ford understood how to use Wayne's screen presence and build stories around it. Together, they created films that defined the classical Western era. Ford's direction and Wayne's acting style worked in a way that made their films feel grounded in tradition and national identity. This partnership helped turn Wayne into a symbol of American values as they were understood at the time. During this period, Wayne starred in films that reinforced themes of law, order, and moral clarity. In Fort Apache, he played a military officer dealing with leadership and conflict inside a frontier setting. In The Searchers, he played a deeply complex character who is driven by duty and personal obsession. These roles showed different sides of authority and discipline, but they all kept Wayne at the center as a strong, guiding figure. His characters were often placed in difficult situations where order had to be maintained and decisions carried serious consequences. As his fame grew, Wayne's public image also became tightly controlled. Interviews, press appearances, and public statements were carefully shaped to reinforce his identity as a traditional figure who valued discipline, patriotism, and older American ideals. He often spoke in ways that reflected what people saw as Old West values, which strengthened his connection with audiences who admired that worldview. However, his rise was not without controversy. During the Hollywood blacklist era, Wayne publicly supported actions and attitudes that aligned with anti-communist sentiment in the industry. This period involved investigations and restrictions placed on people suspected of communist ties in Hollywood. Wayne's support for these measures created early criticism from some groups and began building a more complicated public discussion around his political views. While it did not immediately harm his career, it added tension to his growing public image. Despite this, Wayne's popularity continued to increase. He became one of the most recognizable figures in American cinema, not just for his roles, but for what he represented. His characters and public persona merged into a single image that audiences easily identified with. He was seen as dependable, strong, and unwavering in his beliefs. By this stage, Wayne was no longer just a successful actor. He had become the symbolic face of traditional American masculinity in Hollywood, representing a version of strength and leadership that defined much of the Western genre during its peak years. But while Wayne's influence was firmly established, a different kind of Western hero was beginning to take shape in another corner of the film world: Eastwood's rapid rise. The turning point in Clint Eastwood's career came when he was cast in Italian director Sergio Leone's Western films, known today as the Dollars Trilogy. This included A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. At the time, these films were low-budget productions made outside Hollywood's system. Eastwood was not yet a major star, and the opportunity was considered uncertain rather than guaranteed success. In A Fistful of Dollars, Eastwood introduced a new kind of Western character. He played a quiet, unnamed gunman who spoke very little and showed emotion in a controlled way. This character later became widely known as the Man with No Name. Unlike traditional Western heroes of the past, this figure was not clearly defined as fully good or fully bad. Instead, he operated in a space where moral choices were unclear and survival often mattered more than rules. This approach was very different from the style audiences had seen before in classic Hollywood Westerns. The films gained unexpected international success. Audiences responded strongly to Eastwood's calm presence, minimal dialogue, and unpredictable behavior. However, back in Hollywood, the reaction was not immediately positive. Many studios and industry figures were unsure how to interpret this new style of Western. Eastwood's success in Italy did not instantly translate into respect in the American film system. In fact, he was initially rejected or overlooked for several Hollywood projects because his new image did not fit traditional expectations. Despite this, Eastwood managed to return to American cinema with Hang 'em High. This film marked his transition back into Hollywood productions. In it, he played a lawman who survives a near-death experience and seeks justice within a legal system that is not always fair. The role helped bridge the gap between his Italian Western image and American film audiences. It also showed that he could lead major studio films while still keeping the quiet, controlled style that had made him popular overseas. As his career continued into the late 1960s and early 1970s, Eastwood began moving toward more complex characters. His roles started to show darker emotional layers and less clear moral direction. Instead of traditional heroes who always followed rules, he often played characters who made difficult choices and operated in morally uncertain situations. This shift reflected a broader change in cinema during that time, where audiences were becoming more interested in realistic and flawed characters. During this same period, Eastwood also began developing an interest in directing. He paid close attention to how films were made, often studying camera work, pacing, and storytelling structure while acting in different projects. By the early 1970s, he was preparing to move behind the camera, not just in front of it. This interest would later become a major part of his career and identity in Hollywood. At this point, Eastwood was no longer just a rising actor. He was becoming a creative force with a very distinct style, and his work was starting to reshape how Western stories were told on screen. And as his influence grew, it would soon place him on a collision course with Hollywood's older image of the Western hero. First fault lines. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Hollywood Westerns were starting to change in a major way. The clear and simple stories of good versus bad, which had defined earlier decades, were slowly being replaced with more complex and uncertain narratives. This shift is often described as revisionist Western storytelling. In these newer films, characters were not always fully heroic, and the idea of right and wrong was less clearly defined. This change created a natural divide in how audiences and filmmakers viewed the Western genre. John Wayne strongly disagreed with this new direction. He believed Westerns should reflect clear values like courage, loyalty, and moral certainty. In interviews and public statements, he often criticized modern films that showed violence without clear purpose or heroes with questionable morals. One widely reported moment from this period was when Wayne dismissed the newer style of Westerns as cynical. While he did not reject change in filmmaking entirely, he made it clear that he did not agree with how the genre was being redefined. At the same time, Clint Eastwood was moving in a very different direction, although he was not openly challenging Wayne or the older generation. Instead, Eastwood quietly shifted away from traditional Western roles. His characters became less about clear heroism and more about survival, personal judgment, and independence. He avoided directly commenting on Hollywood's older Western style, but his film choices naturally separated him from it. His work showed a different kind of Western figure, one that did not always follow rules or represent traditional ideals. This difference in approach reflected a larger divide happening in Hollywood. On one side were filmmakers influenced by the John Ford and Wayne era, where Westerns focused on order, patriotism, and strong moral structure. On the other side was the growing New Hollywood movement, which embraced realism, complexity, and characters with flaws. These two styles were not just different creatively, they represented two very different ways of seeing the world. As Eastwood's popularity grew, the media began to notice this divide. Journalists and critics often compared him to Wayne, even when neither actor directly encouraged the comparison. Over time, Eastwood started being described as the anti-Wayne. This label was not something he officially accepted, but it became a common way to explain the difference between them. Wayne represented the traditional Western hero, while Eastwood represented a newer, more uncertain type of character. The tension between these two figures was not personal in the beginning. There were no confirmed private confrontations or direct disagreements between them. Instead, the divide was built through interviews, film reviews, and industry commentary. Each new Eastwood film was often discussed in relation to what Wayne had done in earlier decades, which kept the comparison alive in public conversation. By this stage, Hollywood was clearly moving into a new era, and the Western genre was no longer defined by a single style or message. The gap between old and new storytelling continued to widen, and both actors became symbols of that change in different ways. And as this silent divide grew in public discussion, one film would soon push the disagreement into something much more direct and widely talked about: Dirty Harry. The release of Dirty Harry in 1971 became a major turning point in American cinema, and also a key moment in the growing distance between old and new Hollywood values. The film starred Clint Eastwood as Harry Callahan, a San Francisco police inspector who works outside normal procedures to catch dangerous criminals. The character was direct, quiet, and willing to break rules when he believed it was necessary. Harry Callahan quickly became one of the most controversial film characters of the time. Many viewers saw him as a strong figure who was willing to do what others could not. Others saw something more troubling in his actions. Critics argued that the film showed excessive violence and suggested that breaking the law could be acceptable if it led to results. This created a strong public debate about what kind of behavior was acceptable for a hero on screen. Some critics went even further and accused Dirty Harry of having fascist undertones. They believed the film presented a worldview where authority was enforced through fear and force, rather than fairness and due process. This criticism spread widely in newspapers, film reviews, and public discussions. The debate became larger than the film itself, turning into a broader conversation about violence in cinema and how law enforcement was being portrayed in popular culture. At the same time, supporters of older Hollywood traditions, including those who admired the style associated with John Wayne, also reacted strongly. They were concerned that modern films like Dirty Harry were moving too far away from clear moral storytelling. In their view, excessive violence and unclear moral lines were weakening the traditional image of the Western and law enforcement hero. This group often preferred earlier portrayals, where heroes followed rules and represented clear justice. Even though Wayne was still alive during this period, he was increasingly associated with the older, more traditional approach to law enforcement roles in film. His characters were seen as disciplined and guided by structure and duty. In contrast, Eastwood's Harry Callahan operated in a more unpredictable way, making personal decisions that did not always align with official procedures. This created a clear public comparison. Wayne represented lawful order, while Eastwood represented rule-breaking enforcement. Interviews from this time also showed Wayne distancing himself from what he described as modern violent trends in filmmaking. While he did not directly attack Eastwood, he made it clear that he preferred films that focused on honor, discipline, and clear moral decisions. His comments reinforced the growing idea that Hollywood had split into two different styles of storytelling. On the other side, Eastwood defended his role and the film's approach. He argued that Dirty Harry reflected a more realistic view of policing and crime. In his view, audiences should see characters who deal with difficult situations in imperfect ways. He did not present his character as flawless, but as someone working in a system where decisions were often complicated. This explanation widened the gap between his perspective and the older Hollywood viewpoint. By this point, the divide was no longer just about style or storytelling. It had become a public discussion about values, violence, and the meaning of heroism on screen. And as this debate intensified, another film would soon bring the conflict into a much more symbolic moment for both Hollywood generations: The Shootist. By the mid-1970s, the Western genre was changing quickly, and this shift became even more visible with the final film role of John Wayne. In 1976, he starred in The Shootist, a film that would become his last appearance on screen. In the movie, Wayne played an aging gunslinger named J.B. Brooks, who is dealing with a terminal illness while also facing a world that no longer fits the life he once knew. The story focused on a man who is trying to find peace in his final days while also confronting the reality that the Western world he represents is disappearing. His character is forced to deal with change, uncertainty, and the end of a certain kind of frontier life. This role felt very different from his earlier work, where he often played strong, active heroes in control of their environment. Many critics and audiences saw The Shootist as more than just another film. An incident that stood out during its release was how widely it was interpreted as a symbolic farewell to the classical Western era itself. Because Wayne had been one of the most important figures in traditional Western films, the story of an aging gunslinger was seen as closely connected to his real-life position in Hollywood. The film became a kind of closing chapter for the style of Western storytelling he had represented for decades. At the same time, Clint Eastwood was moving further into a different direction in his career. He was not only acting, but also beginning to focus heavily on directing films. His work during this period became darker and more reflective, often questioning the myths that older Western films had built. Instead of clear heroes and villains, his stories focused on complex characters and difficult moral choices. Wayne, meanwhile, became more openly uncomfortable with this revisionist direction in Western films. While he did not engage in direct public conflict with Eastwood, his comments in interviews showed that he preferred the traditional style of storytelling. He believed Westerns should honor clear values and avoid reshaping the genre into something overly critical or uncertain about its own history. This difference in opinion was often highlighted by journalists, even when neither actor directly addressed the other. Eastwood continued to push the boundaries of the genre through his directing work. Films like High Plains Drifter showed a very different kind of Western narrative. Instead of focusing on clear moral heroes, the film explored themes of revenge, mystery, and unclear identity. These choices were part of a broader shift in his work, where he was actively breaking away from older Western traditions and rebuilding the genre in a new form. Despite the growing public comparison between the two men, there was never any direct collaboration between Wayne and Eastwood. They never appeared together in a film, and there are no known joint projects. The connection between them was mostly built by critics, audiences, and the media, who often framed them as representing two different generations of Western filmmaking. By this stage, the divide between classical and revisionist Westerns was fully visible, and both actors had become symbols of those two very different approaches. And as Hollywood continued to evolve, the story of how this silent comparison was shaped behind the scenes became even more interesting. Confrontations. By the time the public had fully noticed the differences between their careers, the idea of a rivalry between John Wayne and Clint Eastwood had already been shaped more by media and industry talk than by any real personal conflict. In fact, much of what people believed about their disagreement came from interviews, press coverage, and how Hollywood itself chose to frame both actors. One of the most repeated media ideas was that Eastwood was the next John Wayne. Journalists used this comparison often when writing about Eastwood's rising fame in Western and action films. However, Eastwood himself consistently rejected this label. In interviews, he made it clear that while he respected Wayne's work, he did not see himself as a replacement or a continuation of Wayne's screen identity. He wanted to be viewed on his own terms, not as a copy of an earlier generation's star. At the same time, Wayne's professional circle was reportedly uncomfortable with how often his name was linked to modern, more violent anti-hero roles. Even though Wayne himself did not directly attack Eastwood, people around him and parts of his audience felt that the comparison blurred the line between traditional Western heroes and newer, more morally complex characters. This created a sense of tension in public discussion, even without direct contact between the two actors. A notable moment in this indirect exchange came when Eastwood, in interviews, acknowledged Wayne as an influence, but not as a model. He spoke respectfully about Wayne's impact on Western films, but also explained that his own characters and storytelling approach came from a different place. This statement was widely reported and added to the ongoing narrative that the two actors represented separate paths in Hollywood history. Wayne, on the other hand, was often quoted in press appearances defending what he called honorable Western men. He emphasized characters who stood for discipline, clear values, and respect for law and tradition. While he did not directly mention Eastwood in most cases, his comments were frequently interpreted as a contrast to the newer, more uncertain heroes appearing in films of that time. Hollywood journalists played a major role in shaping this perceived rivalry. Articles often highlighted differences between the two actors rather than similarities. Instead of focusing on individual careers separately, they were frequently placed side by side in discussions about how the Western genre was changing. This style of reporting slowly turned comparison into a fixed public idea. Awards ceremonies and industry events also added to the divide. Even when both actors were present at the same events, they were often introduced as representatives of different eras. One symbolized the classic Western tradition, while the other represented a modern reinterpretation. These repeated public moments reinforced the idea of a generational shift rather than a shared artistic space. Studio marketing also contributed to this framing. In some cases, promotional material for Eastwood's films used visual styles or themes that reminded audiences of traditional Western imagery associated with Wayne's era. This was not always intentional, but it added another layer of comparison that kept both names linked in public memory. Despite all of this, neither Wayne nor Eastwood ever publicly confirmed a personal feud. There was no official statement or known direct conflict between them. The rivalry existed mostly through cultural interpretation, repeated media framing, and the way Hollywood chose to position two very different careers. And as this silent comparison became part of film history, the final question remained about how this narrative continued even after Wayne's passing and Eastwood's rise into full creative control. Post-Wayne career. After the death of John Wayne in 1979, many people expected the long-running comparisons between him and Clint Eastwood to fade away. Instead, the opposite happened. The discussion around both men became even stronger, especially as Eastwood's career entered a new and more influential stage. With Wayne no longer active, his image became fixed in time, while Eastwood continued evolving as an actor and filmmaker. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Eastwood shifted deeply into directing, and this is where the divide between the two figures became more noticeable in public discussion. One of the most important films in this period was Unforgiven. In this film, Eastwood did not present a simple Western story. Instead, he focused on older characters, moral consequences, and the violence that comes with a lifetime of past actions. The film avoided easy answers and instead showed how complicated justice and revenge could become. This approach was widely interpreted as a revisionist take on the Western genre. Many critics and viewers saw Unforgiven as a film that questioned the very ideas that earlier Westerns had built. Because John Wayne had been one of the strongest symbols of traditional Western storytelling, some industry critics began framing Eastwood's work as a way of re-examining or even deconstructing the mythology that Wayne represented. This did not mean Eastwood was attacking Wayne personally, but rather that his films were seen as rethinking the type of hero Wayne often played. An important incident in this discussion was how strongly Unforgiven was linked to this idea of breaking the old Western image. Film critics and commentators repeatedly described it as a turning point in the genre. Some even suggested that Eastwood was rewriting the rules that had defined Westerns during Wayne's era. Whether or not Eastwood intended this interpretation, it became a dominant way the film was discussed in reviews, essays, and award season conversations. Despite all this, Eastwood consistently refused to speak negatively about Wayne. In interviews, he made it clear that he respected Wayne's contribution to cinema and did not see any value in criticizing him directly. He separated his own creative direction from Wayne's legacy, even when journalists tried to connect the two. This helped prevent the idea of a personal conflict from becoming stronger than it already was. Over time, the public narrative shifted away from any idea of a real feud and instead became something more symbolic. The relationship between Wayne and Eastwood was often described as an ideological rivalry, meaning it was based on different approaches to storytelling rather than personal disagreement. Wayne came to represent the traditional Western hero, while Eastwood represented a more modern and questioning approach to the same genre. Media outlets continued to revisit this comparison for years. During award seasons, film anniversaries, and retrospectives on Western cinema, journalists frequently returned to the Wayne versus Eastwood framing. Even when the articles focused on Eastwood's new work, they often referenced Wayne as a starting point for comparison. This repeated pattern kept the association alive in public memory long after Wayne's passing. In the end, the divide between them was not built on direct conflict, but on how each one came to represent a different stage in Hollywood's changing view of heroism and the Western genre. And even today, their names still come up together whenever people talk about how Western films changed forever. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more untold stories from the golden age of cinema.